My slides.
Yep, you are good to go, Dominique.
Very good. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dominique Dagenais from the National Science Foundation. I'm a program director at the National Science Foundation, specifically in the engineering directorate, but I will talk about what the NSF has been doing in this area of quantum information. So as you may know, NSF is a foundation that funds research, doesn't do research, but promotes the progress of science. And one of the areas that it has specifically focused on, with 10 big ideas that were launched in 2017, was what we called the quantum leap, to try and advance the field of quantum information science towards more application-oriented, what we call the next quantum revolution. So how did we decide to do that, considering that NSF has been funding quantum information and quantum information science for decades? We decided to move in a totally different direction, and that was to actually look at what we called the 3 C's. First off, convergence. So we agreed that in order to move forward with the field of quantum information science, we really needed to have convergence from multiple disciplines, not just physics, which has been traditionally working on the more fundamental aspects and should continue to do so, but areas in chemistry and biology and engineering and quantum information science, and also looking at it from the perspective of the industrial innovation and partnership. We also wanted to collaborate, not just within NSF across our different directorates, but also externally, by asking our academic researchers to collaborate across departments, and collaboration between NSF and other government entities. And there was a strong push towards building this new community of quantum workforce, which needs to be people coming from different disciplines being able to understand each other and be able to work together as a team. So that has been our approach with this new big idea that we call the quantum leap. And we have put together a series of programs over the years. And I'm just gonna touch on some of those. All those programs, if you're interested, you can go into the NSF website and look into more details on when they were started, who was funded, what kind of research was funded on each and every one of those. So originally, the engineering actually in 2016, so before even that quantum leap, pushed together an EFRI program which explores frontiers of research and innovation. That's what EFRI, the acronym EFRI, stands for, in the area of quantum communication. And this was meant to push the engineering community to start working cross-disciplinary area to move the quantum communication systems ideas out of the lab and into more practical devices and integration. In addition to that, we put together through this QuizNet program what we call triplets, which allowed PhD students with their mentor to collaborate with a private sector or a government lab through some internship. And this program was followed up by DOE and Air Force, which together with NSF put together some quantum science summer schools, and there's still one going on or planned this July at UC Santa Barbara, I believe, for all those different students from different disciplines to come to a certain site for a week and then learn about what is quantum information science with some hands-on experiments as well as some invited speakers. In addition to that, we put together what we call an ideas lab, which is essentially a means to get multiple people from a certain community to form together teams to address a specific problem. And in this case, the problem was fully connected quantum computing. And the outcome of this Ideas Lab was a program that was funded on a trapped ion, the lead being Ken Brown. And that is actually still ongoing, but it had an additional supplement to look at the full stack from the hardware all the way to the computer science community for algorithm development based on trapped ion. Another program that we have as we're moving up on that arrow was what we call QMAs, which was solicitation looking for new foundries that would allow the development and the fabrication of quantum materials and devices to sustain the community, the research community, so they could have access to the appropriate platforms to perform their research. And two foundries have been funded and are operating right now. One is at UC Santa Barbara, and the other one is a combination of Montana and Arkansas called Monarch that is looking at different platforms from diamonds to two-dimensional materials, so a very broad range of materials, and allowing people who want to collaborate in those different developments to work with those foundries to get an advance in the field of materials and devices for the research community. In parallel to that, we developed what we called incubators for transforming some of the challenges that exist in quantum science by, again, asking the community to put together multidisciplinary teams tackling one of specific challenges. This has gone over 3 different iterations of this program that we call TACS. And the last and latest one, I should say, is called Quick TACS for Quantum Interconnect, and has been funding 10 different teams working in the area of interconnection, quantum interconnection that could be used for connecting chip to chip or computer to computer or node to node. So different levels of connection with or without repeaters from very short distances to longer distances. What are the challenges and what is needed to advance some of the science and technology to make some of those functionalities happen. Last but not least in this Quantum Leap has been the Quantum Leap Challenge Institute. This is actually something that followed the NQI Act, where NSF was asked to support at least 5 institutes. And we have been funding 5 over 2 years of competition. And those 5 quantum challenge institutes cover a broad range of potential future application, including quantum sensing, quantum communication, quantum computing, computing interconnections, quantum simulation, and also quantum biology. Unfortunately, I don't believe that Pradeep Phule is able to join us today, but he has been.
I joined. Dominique, I joined.
He's here.
So Pradeep can tell you more about convergence accelerators, which is a specific program pushing towards quantum technology. I have a small slide on that, Pradeep, and when I get to it, I'll leave it to you to
Okay.
a little more detail on it, and I'll go through some of those. And the ongoing program that we have now, which is out on the street as an open solicitation, is what we call Expand QISE, which is a program that is meant to increase diversity in the field of quantum information science by asking some of the institutions that are not top tier competitive in the area of quantum information science to look at how they could collaborate with some of the more established institutions that the NSF has been funding. So going into a little bit more detail, just to go through some of those items that I mentioned. The 5 quantum challenge institutes are listed here, as mentioned, on quantum networks, on quantum sensing, on quantum computing, quantum simulation, and quantum sensing for bio. And you can see the lead PI lead institutions listed there. They all have an open and working website that you can go to look at more details. There are a lot of other institutions, but those 5 that are involved in there that are collaborating within those institutes, of course. In addition, I'd like to add that we also have an engineering research center that is more focused, of course, in the engineering aspect rather than the larger cross-disciplinary aspect of the institute. And it is focused on quantum networking and led by the University of Arizona. For the convergence accelerators, as mentioned, Pradeep, I put here the 4 phase 2 teams that are leading the research there. And Pradeep, I'll leave it to you to say a few words on that one.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Dominique. Sorry, I was a few minutes late joining in. But one thing I want to make clear is a number of the activities that Dominique showed earlier on, they all kind of represent a spectrum of activities that we have. Most of them are based on research, but we do have a focus on workforce and education development as well in some of them. And also there is another difference is that some of the projects or some of the programs that Dominique mentioned are very focused on the fundamental research, and some of them, like the ones here that you see in Convergence Accelerator especially, are more towards applied research, more use-inspired research, and they are more translational. So while we don't quite go all the way to very high TRL levels, but there is a shift in the technology readiness level in a lot of programs that Dominique shared. So when it comes to Convergence Accelerator, this is about close to a $30 to $35 million total investment in these projects. And the way the projects that you see here, led by different universities, these projects came prior to this. They were about 10 or 11 teams in phase 1. And then it's a very, very competitive program. And then, of course, we have these teams that moved on to phase 2. Each team gets $5 million, up to $5 million. And it's a cooperative agreement, and it's a 2-year time frame. And the focus really is on deliverables. So we want these teams to have either a low fidelity prototype or something that they can demonstrate. We don't expect, obviously, these teams to commercialize in a matter of 2 years. If that happens, that's great. But the commercialization is not the goal. but the direction, the vector has to point in the direction of translation, not even commercialization, but kind of getting it out from the lab into the real world. So that's the idea behind this. And I'm just going to use one quick example of the project that's being led by University of Maryland. So that's the Edo Wax is the PI on that project. And what you see is a little bit a very simple description of this in terms of demonstrating a local quantum local area network. So just to give you a quick idea, what this project is all about is it's all about hardware as well as software integration that will ultimately enable this team to interconnect quantum computers that are located at University of Maryland, then the Army Research Labs, NIST, and Marquee, that's another organization based in Maryland. And they involve, what you don't see here is how many different organizations, how many different industry players are involved in this, working very closely with these teams. And I see we have Christina from Cold Quanta, and Cold Quanta is one of the very critical players for the University of Maryland project. So, and I'm sure there are others, there are many other players, but just to give you an example. So all these projects really seek convergence. So that means we want people from different disciplines who are physicists, electrical engineers, material science people, etc. And of course, quantum science and quantum computing people to come together, work very closely with industry and other partners to really see how they can translate some of the findings or some of the earlier knowledge into the real world. That's the expectation. That's what these projects are all about. If you would like to learn more about these projects, I'll be happy to connect with you separately. But I think, Dominique, I think that probably gives a pretty good overall bigger picture of what the tracks, what we call as track C on quantum technology within the convergence accelerator.
Thank you very much, Pradeep. So Pradeep highlighted a few points that are very specific to the convergence accelerators, which is this translational aspect, but the aspect of collaboration with the private sector is also something that you would find in some of the challenge institutes, albeit at a more fundamental level. So there are collaborations happening in all those different programs that I have shown across academia, across government, and across partnership with industrial collaborators as well. And as I mentioned, one of the ongoing solicitation right now on the street is this Expand QISE, and it is meant to allow institutions of higher education that have less funding in the area of quantum information science and are less established in this area to collaborate by pairing with an external, either an external investigator, single investigator, or an external team with several collaborators as a means to expand the community that works in the quantum information science. Again, one of the hopes that we have in those areas is that new researchers will be coming from different institutions with different culture, different viewpoints to bring into the diversity of the researchers. What we have found over those few years of programs that we have put together is that by working across boundaries, we come up with a lot of more creative ideas than by staying in our more siloed department or in the case of NSF directorates. So it has been one of the major foundational culture of what we have been doing in the past 10 years at NSF to move the area of quantum information science is to really increase that cross-disciplinary collaboration and increase partnerships across different boundaries. What I have not shown here is that we also collaborate through OSTP, the Office of Science and Technology, which has its own quantum coordination office, by working together with the other government entities, QEDC, NIST, DOD, and DOE, through workshops and through dissemination of information to try and increase our perspective on where the challenges are in the area of quantum information. Pradeep and I, both coming more from an engineering perspective, are very interested in pushing that frontier of information science outside of the lab and into something that can actually be practically implemented into systems that can be used by the private sector or with the help of the private sector. So it is very important to us to actually know where your challenges are and see how we can collaborate to essentially move and advance that field further. The NQI Act is an act that is a 10-year. It was signed in December 2018. So we have a few more years in front of us. And our hope is that with the programs that we have been in place and putting in place and new ones that we hope to continue doing, we will be able to put together some breakthroughs that will actually have strong societal impact that will establish quantum information science outside of the labs and into society. So one of the examples I was going to put in here just to show the interest that we have is the Engineering Research Center, for example, has a specific team that is actually looking at the implications of quantum networking and quantum communication from the social perspective and putting together workshops and discussions to look at the social aspects and the societal benefits or pitfalls that could come from developing and establishing a new technology into the private sector. And I believe that's all I had for you in terms of slides. And Pradeep and I, if you have any questions, we'll be more than happy to answer.
Thank you so much for your presentation today. It was very helpful. I have a quick question and then we can open it up for other folks. You had mentioned looking at kind of the fundamental research and the foundational research as well as applied. You've talked about quantum computing as well as sensing. As you're looking at the depth and breadth of the quantum industry, from in computing, you have annealing and gate, you have superconducting chips, ion traps, obviously the quantum sensing and quantum communications are broad. What are the gaps that you look at as the research that's not being done now that you would want to, look at, and how can industry help potentially identify or bring those to you?
So from the perspective of the academics, we have been trying to indeed look at where the gaps were and developing those programs that I propose to fill in those gaps. So there have been gaps in terms of accessing the right material. So that's why we put foundries there. And there's still gaps there because it's still some of those platforms are still very young and under development. There's definitely gaps in the high cost of entry of doing research in quantum information. So that's why we have this Expand QISE, which we hope is going to allow people who may not have access to those machines or this equipment that is quite expensive and in some cases quite unique, to be able to still pursue some of their ideas by collaborating with entities who have those equipments on their premises. We also have seen that there is still a big gap, at least in my perspective, and I'll let Pradeep answer as well, in understanding where the quantum advantage will be. What will be the user case that will show the quantum advantage? And there are a lot of parameters there that can come into play. What is quantum advantage? At what cost? What will it take? What will be the benefits?
If I can just chime in on that, what Dominique was saying is, I think that's really a good question that a lot of teams have is, for example, if you take some of the discussions we have had, I've had with folks in the energy sector, for example, right? You look at climate change. We know, for example, quantum computing can be very helpful for simulation of some basic, fundamental chemical reactions, those kinds of things, right? But when it comes to the supercomputing tools that we have with conventional computing versus quantum, so where is the quantum advantage, right? So these are the discussions we have is where are the examples of either fundamental research questions or application spaces where quantum computing is shown to be very clearly advantageous from a variety of perspectives, whether it's, so I think that's one of the challenges that we really think is, and I think, and Dominique will be far more knowledgeable than I am, but I think just there is a lot of uncertainty because it's an emerging field. So what type of qubit, how scalable, those kinds of things, right? So I think all of you, I don't need to convince you about that, but that uncertainty, not knowing, which kind of systems will ultimately, quote unquote, win, will there be one, will there be two? So there is a lot more. So sometimes it's hard to figure out where do we put our resources in.
Yeah. I just had one quick question. I know we're kind of late on time here. For the University of Maryland, it's working on the quantum networks to connect. Are they also working with any of the industry consortiums that are trying to develop the QKD networks right now? That research and that commerciality with the government, also with InQtel and some other places, is underway. Are they collaborating with the University of Maryland on those? Do you know?
Well, University of Maryland is leading the project. So are you asking if they're working with other places?
Yeah, I was just curious if they are in liaison with the other commercial entities that are developing and researching QKD and those networks and the connectivity.
So yeah, so I don't know if they have specific effort that is focused on QKD as such, but I know they work with a lot of companies,
Okay.
including, as I mentioned, Cold Quanta,
Okay.
IonQ. They are working with a number of other companies like Cisco and so on and so forth. So
Thank you.
But their real focus is really figuring out how to connect different types of quantum computers on a platform that's kind of agnostic to what is the type of qubit or what type of computer they're working with. So that's what they're focused on.
Okay, great.
Awesome. I'm gonna have to stop us.